Alright, so welcome back. So something different today. Seeing it's a brand new year, something I've been asked to do probably since the channel started, and I've never got around to doing it. I did it on the machinery, but I've never done it on the infrastructure of the farm, and that's to give you a little bit of history, how we built the farm up over a lot of years, when my father bought it, me taking it over, just all of that. So the whole ins and outs of how we actually got to what we have now, both in the planning end of things and financially. So just a bit of history on the farm. So we could talk of this for days. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to shove this all into as short as I possibly can, just cram in as much as I can. So we'll start off with the first part of our place, and that is our, what we call our big garden. It's now a field, of course, but if you watch the channel from day one, you'll remember when that was a garden. This wall here used to come up the whole way to here. Used to be an oil tank there. That's the two holes that used to hold it in place. You would have seen this in the first few videos of our channel. Well, that wasn't always called the big garden. So my parents moved here in the 50s. The grew potatoes there. That was all ploughed out with a TEF20 and a plough very similar to what's sitting there. Had spuds, cabbage, there was loads and loads of different things. I don't remember that. I'm still a bit too young for that one. But on this side here, we used to have all the blackcurrant trees and strawberries and stuff like that. My mother used to make jam and different things as well. Used to remember that well because my mother would make rhubarb tart. Used to love that, and blackberry jam and all that kind of stuff. So they were great memories. I can actually still taste it in my mouth when I talk about it. So yeah, so that was a big garden. That was a start. So we're going to move on then to here. Our machinery shed, a lot of people tell me now, tear it down. That's not going to happen. There's a couple of reasons why. It's very, very handy. But my father built it. My father built this in the early 90s. It's built with ESB poles and cavity blocks. It's well built. He put an awful lot of time. He did everything by hand, apart from the digging out. That's the only other bit, but he dug all the foundations with a pick and shovel. He poured them all with big stones and concrete, and the walls have never cracked. He plastered it, he roofed it, he done everything. So my dad's 88 years old now, and you know, he doesn't always be in the best of health this last while. He just hasn't been in great form, but he's okay. But them things to me are a treasure, and it's something that he put his stamp on the farm. So for me to come along and just tear it down like it meant nothing would be wrong. I'd be heartbroken if I did that. I'd never forgive myself. So this is not going to go anywhere. Even if it was completely useless, it's something he built. It's his stamp on the farm. So that there is staying there. It's not very big. It doesn't hold an awful lot. You could have done it being deeper and probably twice the width, but you know, we hadn't got a lot of funds that time. Money was scarce, and he built what he could afford. The timbers and all were second hand. I think the sheeting was second hand as well. And you know, he done well with what he had. There was no floor put into it until I built this silage pit. It was just a mud floor. But look, it kept a lot of machinery dry. It done its job. We had a big storm once on Stephen's night, and the wind got in here, and it completely took half of this shed away. You can see the kind of line on the galvanized there where the two different roofs meet. This is fresh timber, and that's the old timber. But another thing you might notice, you mightn't fit to see it in camera, is all this new timber is all bolted. Everything's bolted together. My father nailed everything together and sometimes tied it with wire and things, which wasn't great. The timber wasn't as heavy either, and that probably left the roof that it was a little bit more vulnerable. After that happened, it broke my father's heart because he wasn't getting any younger, and he was real busy, and it really, really annoyed him to see the roof had been taken off. It landed right on the top of that hill up there, fully intact, but on the top of that hill. So I was about 14, 15 years old, and we all had timber, new timber this time. And I remember my father was away that particular day. He was actually in hospital that particular day. There was nothing wrong, he was just going for a checkup. He was gone for that complete day, and I decided I'd do something just to cheer him up, because I knew this was taking a lot out of him. And I was still at school, and also I was working in a tyre punch repair place after school, 3 evenings a week after school, so I hadn't got much time. But I remember this one particular day, and I planned it out. I had the timber here the day before. I just said to myself, you know what, we'll get it done before he comes back, and he'll give him a nice boost, something nice to come home to. So when I say we, I mean I. That's what I done. I took into it. My mother came up. She couldn't understand where all the bathroom was taking place up here, because I really tore into it. And I got the whole roof on, sheeted and all in about 6-7 hours. And you know what? It was a tough day's work. But see the reaction on my father's face when he got home and seen it. It was worth it, because it made his day, it made his week, it made his month, it probably made his year. And that was the story behind that. So them little things have stories. There's much more to it than just a shed. So when I took over this farm, I was about 21, 22 years of age, if you can remember right, in around that age. And my father retired, took early retirement, but we all know early retirement can mean one thing for one person, and it can mean a different thing for a farmer, because you never really retire. He never really did, but he did start taking it a lot easier. We kind of made him take it easier, if that makes sense, because he had worked very hard in his life and he deserved a well-earned rest. So before I took over the farm, I went to Ballahills College. I done my green certificate. That time was only 1 year, and then I went off and done 3 months placement straight away, and I've done all this just straight after leaving school. Another part of that course was that you get an insulation aid. Now, an insulation aid was just basically like a grant you get after you complete your course, do your placement and get your green cert. And that's all gone now, unfortunately. I don't think there's anything really there now. I know the course is over 2 years, but the amount I got, if I remember right, in pounds was £7,000, which was a nice little pot of money to get. And straight away the following year, after taking over the farm, this was the first thing I done. This was badly needed. Now we're in here at the crush, and I want to show you this wall of the crush here. Now, if you look closely there, do you see the way the wall is plastered halfway down? It's lower there, and as far as you come up, you can see the way it gets higher and higher and higher. Well, there's no plaster on the wall. Well, there's a reason for that. That used to be the ground level. The old pit that was here before was in the exact same place, although there was no walls. You just had a sloping concrete going down. Our farm is all unfortunately built into quite a steep hill. It makes for any project you do, you have an awful lot of excavation work to do. So that there used to be the actual ground level. So the ground level would have been here the whole way up, and we had to dig all that back the whole way to get our ramp in for our silage pit. So we got our pit done, and definitely the little bit of insulation money I got, and I got a grant as well for doing this. I don't think it was 60% now, it was 40%, I think, that time, if I remember right. So we still had to put a good few pound to it. And remember, one of the biggest problems was the amount of excavation work always adds up, because once you take it away you have to put it somewhere else. So for us, we put it down here on this side of the yard to build this yard up, start building it up for future developments, which we're getting into now. Right, so we're getting on rightly. Just where I'm standing here right now, do you see that line in the concrete there? They used to run a wall from here the whole way out to that pass out there where that girder is, or the straw you see. And that wall would have been coming down to probably around about where this line is. And in that place we had an open door here running the length, and we had a row of cubicles. So we had an old cubicle house here, and that's where our cows used to lie. Just an ordinary cement floor, no slats or anything in it, and we used to scrape it out this way and then scrape it into that manhole there. That's all we had. Fortunately, that cubicle house wasn't built in the best place. It was grand for the layout of the yard, because we used to have 2 ring feeders in the yard, and my father used to feed them with 2 ring feeders. And here across here we used to have a barrier. Just actually remember it now as I talk about it. And cows could also come out here and eat along silage just put along here as well. So we had 3 different feeding positions for them cows that were in this shed. This shed here was built in 1987. It was the first big investment my father made, had to be done, because there was no future for the farm unless this shed was built. So this was the start of it. My father made that investment, built it up. The only thing I wish he would have done with it was build it another 2 foot higher. Would have been great, because it would have took a lot of the slope out of this yard. It would have took a huge amount of slope out of this yard. But it's grand, it's a good house, cows are nice and comfortable in it, and it's still as good inside as the day it was built. Up right until about 2006, that's what we had. We had this shed here, we had an old byre here, wagon roof byre, we had this pit, and we had this old cubicle house. And all of this you see here, none of this was here. This was all just grass and an open area. Then we hit into 2006, and that was one of the biggest crunch years on our farm, because I had to consider the future. What were we going to do? I was making in a five a time pipeline on an old byre. We were up and tying the cows into mangers side by side, and there wasn't going to be a mad future into that. It was all right for the time, but it was getting very, very backward, and we knew there was going to have to be an investment made somewhere along the line. So the next thing that happened was I had to consider making an investment. Do I build a milk and parlour first, or do I build a slab house first? I needed both of them. I needed both of them really, really quickly, because even with this cubicle house that was here and that slab house, we hadn't near enough room to hold all our cattle, so some cattle had to be wintered still outside, and that was a pain in the backside. We were making it work, but we were needing to definitely make an investment. So after a long bit of sitting down and going through figures and just really, really crunching numbers, and everything looked very, very scary. I promise you, it was very scary stuff. Probably one of the most stressful times I've ever been through. I was also building my house at the same time, and we were dealing with all the stuff that's involved with that, and getting married then in 2007. So there was a lot happening and a lot of financial decisions being made, and I had to be careful. So this new grant came out, a 70% to build the slatted houses. Now, a lot of you will remember this grant. It was a good thing at the beginning, it was a disaster at the end, and we were in at the end, so we felt the little bump that came at the end of that. But there also was a 40% grant running for dairy equipment as well. So we had 2 grants running at the same time, and we decided we'd go ahead and we just build both of them at the one time. Now that might sound simple, there was a lot to it before we made that decision. So long story short, anyway, we built the slab house first, put in this whole entire yard. And then the next thing we done was, straight after it, about 8 months after, we started our milking parlour. It was a very stressful time for me because when the shed was built, the grant didn't come through. The government started to get themselves in a bit of a pickle, didn't have enough money to pay the people then that were owed money for grants, and that turned into a big problem. I remember one night at about 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting in the kitchen with the table just full of sheets, looking at numbers and looking at what we were spending on it, and hand was in my head rubbing it. And I'll be honest with you, I was feeling it, my body was feeling it, my mental health was feeling it. It was knocking me. It was knocking me a lot. It was affecting my day's work as well. I had to just get a grip of it and say, you know what, we're in it now, we're already started, just get this thing finished and see how it works out in the end. We managed to get a thing called a bridge and term loan, which basically covered us for the grant that we were supposed to get and we didn't get. And the government then paid us in stages over 3 years to make up for the grant that we were due. So everything worked out, and that was a weight off my shoulders. But bear in mind, when I built this shed, I was at the very last of getting in for that grant. It wasn't because it just took me a long time to get round to it. It was because I was really, really thinking about it a lot, and I nearly wasn't going to do it. But when we got into it, the prices of material and stuff had just through the roof. Absolutely went through the roof. Quadrupled in price. This shed here cost about 35,000 more than the shed I built in our other farm there a couple of years ago. They're practically the same style of shed. The other shed has a crush, walls around it, all the concrete and works. If I had built it 2 years later without any grant, I would have built it an awful lot cheaper. So exactly where you see this milking parlour, there was a wagon roof buyer. So the buyer was exactly the same size as this, in exactly the same place. Had a door here and a door there. So the buyer was split in two. This was the side we were making in. This was called the new buyer. We used to name it the new buyer because it was a new section. And if you went in this door, you had 3 mangers and you could put 2 cows in each manger. So you could get 6 cows in there. And on this side here, it was a double mangered buyer, if you know what I mean. So you had a door going in with a kind of a lowered ground level. And on both sides, you could put 6 cows on either side. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made was taking that shed down. If you're developing a farm of your own, I would give you a great advice on one thing. Don't pull down any sheds unless you really, really have to. My wagon roof, I was told by several, pull it down, pull it down. And I listened to it, and that was a mistake because I could have built this milking parlour there, out there into a small garden that's out there and run it this way and kept my wagon roof buyer. And that wagon roof buyer would have been an excellent shed for calves, raising calves and things. But I was told it was the wrong place to build it. I listened to a couple of planners who are definitely wrong now, realised they were wrong now. My father said we should pull it down. If I could turn that clock back, it'd be still there and I'd have a great house then for calves. That was a mistake. So I would give you advice if you're ever doing planning on a yard or whatever, don't be too quick to pull down any sheds unless they're falling down around them. My milking parlour, most of it's second hand. A local farmer who retired from farming, a nice clean person who looked after their stuff really well. And I went to his parlour and I tore it all down myself, took it all apart and drew it all home. We managed to use a lot of it, a lot of the pipe work, a lot of the claw pieces, a lot of the switches, none of the frame. The frame's all new. These here are all new as well. But we did save an awful lot of money by doing that. I think I paid about €1,300 for the old milking parlour, and it probably saved me a lot more, if you know what I mean, by putting them pieces in because stuff was quite expensive. This is all a Delta valve parlour. So yeah, all them little bits and pieces, bits of connections and things, they definitely helped. Now we're in our dairy. This here wasn't always here. I'm not sure if you ever seen it on our videos. I don't think you did. I think it was always this one you seen. But I used to work on another farm. He was making 140 cows, this man. Rather than one big tank in the dairy, he had 2 smaller tanks. And that way, if anything ever happened or it never got into the tank, they shouldn't get into it. One tank was for morning, one tank was for evening, if you know what I mean. So he was never going to have to throw out a full big tank. But he retired from milking, and I bought the old tank off him. And the old tank cost me, I think, about €400. And the guy that was putting it in for me said, I think it's not worth your while, Adrian. I don't think that thing's going to last. It's as old as the hills. It was an old alpha valve big tank. And it had an old orange thing here in the corner where you could turn it down, nearly like the old washing machines, to turn on and off the wash. The wash never worked on it when I used to work on that farm. But a wee bit of tinkering around, it was quite a simple, straightforward thing. I got it working myself. Got a man to fit it in, and that tank run flawless. Apart from a couple of little bearings going in the wash pump that used to sit on the ground here in front of the outlet. You used to have to, it's sort of legs, and you have to hook it up to the tank every time you want to wash the tank. But apart from that, I think in parts probably cost about 150 quid over 10 years, and the quality was always good, everything was good about it. It was some value. The only downside about it was the old compressor. It was running on the old gas. Old gas was getting hard to get, and it would run for quite a while, so it was hard on ESB. But this one would have the milk cooled 15-20 minutes after milking, it's off. The other one could run for a couple of hours. That was the only downfall. But it just goes to show you don't have to go out there and spend a huge amount of money to get the same result. And that brings me to just to give you an example of what you can do. When this parlour was being built, the old byre that were there obviously had to be demolished, and between it being demolished and this place here being built, we had to have somewhere to milk our cows. So the old milking parlour that I had bought, I got all the old feed mangers, and we weren't going to reuse them, but I got them anyway. And what I done was, there's holes here in this wall. See them 2 holes there? If you go up here, there should be another 2 holes. There's another one. There's another one. And so on. I got the old mangers and attached 8 of them the whole way up along there. And then I used the bars that are on top of the rails of the walls here, and I built a roof, basically a makeshift roof. Put up a decent roof that wasn't going to blow away. I've been milking here for a good few months, so I want to build something that I'm comfortable in, and I want to be completely closed in as well. So I put a roof down from that there and down onto this roof, and I used this here as a place where the cow would put their back against, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like the rails that would be in the parlour at the moment. A wee bit awkward because you had to put your hands through here to put it onto the cow, but you got used to it fairly quick. So then I was able to walk up and down, use the crush as kind of a walkway, up and down behind the backs of the cows as the cows was being milked. In here, which is one of our calf houses now, and we set up our whole wash unit there. So our troughs was there for washing, our pipes came through here. And just here in this corner, we see our power washing pipes and things. We got a mobile tank that just basically had everything on it. You just had to plug it in and away it went. So we got the end of a mobile tank which went there. We set everything up. We plumbed in taps, hot water boiler on the wall. I did it all myself, apart from the connecting up of the actual milking machine. But I set up the motor. I set up all the pipes, put the roof on it, wired it with all lights and everything. It was actually a very good job. I should have filmed it because it would have been a great thing to show my kids now. I wished I had photoed it or done something with it, but look, no point in talking about that now. But that setup, believe it or not, cost next to nothing to set up. Took me about 4 to 5 days to build the entire thing. When the cows got used to it, I could milk the cows half the time it took me to milk in the pipeline that we were milking in for many's and many's a year. So that was a simple setup. I know there's a lot of regulations now with Board B and stuff. You can't just put up whatever you like. But you know something? That was so damn good, and it costs so little amount of money. Here behind you, I put in a set of wooden steps the whole way down there, so our milkman could reverse the milk tank up here and come down this pipe and take the milk out of here. Just something to think about. If you're young and you're starting off, don't always jump for the best thing that's out there. You can do an awful lot with your hands if you just plan it. It's all to do with the bit of planning and thinking, sitting down and just thinking things through. Hopefully there's a bit of advice you can take from that. But anyway, we're going to keep moving on. When we had this shed built, this area out here, so we're going to go out and have a look at it first. By the way, this is what I'm at in between video shots. This girl is just after calving a lovely little small heifer calf. Smallest calf we probably had in about 2 years, but very healthy. Going to be sucking away there now, hopefully in another hour. And we have 2 heifers and 2 cows will calve today as well, and we had 3 last night, so we're busy. But anyway, this was where our yard used to come out to. So our yard used to come out here, this concrete yard. There's the end of this tanker there, and you can see the drop there is. Like, you've seen how much we had to build up, and this is all the stuff we took out of the silage pit. We were digging out the silage pit and stuff we drew down from a sandpit quarry we have on top of our hill. This was a very open area, and we're up fairly high, and we get a lot of wind a lot of the time. So this area here was blowing into the yard, and I'm telling you, when there was a wind and rain, it wasn't a nice place to work. So the first thing I done was I built this. This was our original calving pen. I built this on my own, totally myself. The timbers are actually the timbers that came off the roof that blew off, the one I talked about at the beginning of this video. So these timbers are the ones that would have been on the old shed. I used bits and pieces that were still good. All I had to buy was the cross members and the galvanized. You can see the holes. Although the water never comes through them, But you can see the holes, they're on the risen part, so water doesn't tend to ever get into them. The floor's always dry anyway. But all them holes would have been the holes originally that would have been on the other roof. So waste not, want not. That was good, that saved me a lot of money. All I had to get was blocks. It took me a little while to build because I was working and farming as well. I was still working off farm that time too. So it took time. I built it over the summer, but I was glad I did because then we had a calving pen and it worked extremely well. That blocked a lot of wind coming in there. So but we still had the issue of the open area here. And you know what? Then it just sprung to my mind. Why not just build on the concrete that's already here? I know along the edge there it was thick enough. And I said if we put in a steel frame, put up the galvanized and then I'll build the walls around it, we could have 2 calving pens, which would work absolutely brilliantly, which it did. And we'd also have a completely closed in yard, which now is lovely and comfortable. It's a pleasure actually to be in because you can stand here in the middle of the yard and you can see every single animal in the yard the whole way around you. And that is a comfort. I got the steel frame made up and the steel frame then erected. The boys came and joined it into the overhang over here. And they put up the whole steel frame for me and then I came along, built the blocks myself. I never go around to plastering them. One job I never like is plastering. Do not like plastering. Build all day long, but not plastering. So after the frame went up and the block work was built, I hung all these gates myself. I just took a bit of time with the welder and hung them all and put in just certain kind of areas here where you can move stuff around a bit easier. We have our double calving pen, although don't really use this side as often. Sometimes you'll have to use it, but normally I get away with just using the one. Cameras is great because I can always watch cows all the time, so I'm never really dependent on just looking at them in the calving pen. I'm keeping an eye on them all the time when they're on the slats too. So that's why I tend to just put the straw bales in here and just use the one side of the calving pen. So when I built that, I left an area between the 2 sheds. And that area is basically the walkway right through here and right up here into this other shed. This walkway is invaluable because I can bring cows down here on my own. I can bring this gate across here and this one out, and I can run cows in and out of the calving pen or run them from the other shed in here and straight to the milking parlour all by myself without any help. It's all just to do a little bit of planning here and there, makes life a lot easier for you. So this is our calf unit. Now our calf unit, as you can see, has cubicles in it. And as you can see also we have a nice little supply of calves coming here in the last day or two. These cubicles used to run on down there probably another 15 foot, and this used to be also a cow house. So we used to have cows would come in here, and this small little manger was exactly the way it is now. They come in here and they go up and they lay down between them cubicles. But when I built the new started shed, this became obsolete, didn't need it, so I welded on these bits of steel here and converted it in, turned it into a calf house. The roof was in bad shape in this house, it was in terrible bad shape. My father got the timber second hand, again money wasn't plentiful. So about 5 years ago, I re-roofed this. Now, I'm not a carpenter, I'm not a chippy of any sort, but I think I've done it all right. I've done it all completely on my own. It took me about 3 days to do it. All new timber, all new galvanized, skylights, 3 skylights, which makes a big difference. I wired it all as well. It didn't cost a lot of money to do, and now we have a fresh, strong roof on the top of this. I've done a lot of fixing up of the walls and things too. I just have one wall there I have to plaster. Again, the job I just don't like. But otherwise than that, that's it. It's a good strong house. It's a nice warm house for calves. Still a nice airy house at the same time. Steel beams you see here, I have to take them down. But the reason for them being there was there used to be a joist running up here. That's how close the joist was originally. And the joists were so badly rotten and everything, I put these steel beams in to kind of push the roof up. And the roof used to actually rest on them. That was the old roof. But that's the reason they're there. Just to support the old roof that used to be on. Behind here we have my little workshop. It's only a small little workshop, you've seen that loads of times before. And we have a couple of older sheds up there. They're old mud wall sheds. They're not in great condition, but look at the store stuff. There doesn't be really a whole pile in them. This one behind here, which is basically next to the workshop that I have, used to be for pigs actually, because my father used to keep sows. He used to have only a few sows, but he used to have them. They always had pigs at home, and he continued on with that. But after a few years, he just got kind of sick of them, and the torture that came along with them. So he used to have sows on the farm, so that's another one you probably never knew. When I inherited the farm, I didn't inherit a bank balance of none. It was zero, and I had to kind of start from scratch. Everything that I've bought or done with this farm has all came from one thing and one thing only really, and that's the amount of milk our cattle has produced. When I was 14, 15, I worked in a tyre changing place after school, and then I worked on 2 farms. And I will say one thing to you, if you get a chance to travel or work on different farms, do it. I worked on a farm that milked about 120, 130 cows, and I've done that for quite a while. Started a lot of mornings at 3:45 in the morning, then came home and done my own work, and then went back and worked that evening it again, then come home and done my own work after that. And yes, it was a long day, it was a cruel long day, but I learnt an awful lot from it. And then I went and I'd done my 3 months placement on a really classy farm in Kilnaleck in County Calving. A lovely family, they're probably well known, but really well treated there, but learned from the best. Learned really from the best. A lot of fencing, a lot of way layout, paddocks and fields and things like that. It just woke me up and showed me what could be done. So when I took over the farm, infrastructure was one thing, but getting our fields right and our paddocks right, we might do a video on that, probably separate, because that's a whole thing on its own. But I spent a lot of money on trying to get it to where it is now. Very frightening even going into the leg of that, but I'm glad I did it. I have no regrets because it's all here now, it's paid for, we're in the green zone, and you know what, I'm proud of it. I'm really proud of it because I know the amount of work it takes to get there. Now, a lot of people do ask in the channel, they'd like to meet my parents, or would I like to see my father help me out in building the TEF20. Okay, I want to kind of cover that because I've never probably covered it in the farm before, but my father is 88, he's 89 this year, and his health is good, but he has little bits of issues he had this year, and it just left him off bad form. Nothing really serious, but kind of has left him in the house a little bit more than normal, but hopefully this year it'll be a better year. My mother, unfortunately, is 10 years younger than my dad, but my mother had a really bad stroke about 8 years ago, and it was quite devastating to her. The car you probably see at the house, a lot of people do ask about that as well, a Hyundai Ascent. That was her car. She used to do nursing back and forth, so she'd do house calls. Very fit as a fiddle. Just one day she had a really bad stroke and it left her quite bad for quite a while, but luckily enough, over a long period of time of rehabilitation, she got 90% of her mobility back. Just a little bit on her speech is all that affects her now, but otherwise than that, she's grand. She just never got the confidence to go out and drive again, so the car unfortunately hasn't really moved in the last 8 years. That kind of took away a lot of her confidence, left her that she doesn't really go out that often now. She doesn't do the things she normally used to do, and that was a big hit to me because it knocked me back. Because when you're the person at home, like my brothers and sisters, they work away from home, but when you're the person at home and you're dealing with your parents every day of the week and you're talking to your parents, you're in for a cup of tea, and that happens, life changes just on the spur of a moment. But thankfully all worked out. Every night I go into them before I'm done my walk or before I go home and have a quick chat with them, know what's happening during the daytime, or what cow is going to calve the night, or this kind of crack. And also my father and my mother watch me videos, so they get to see everything that's happening, and they're enjoying them more than anybody. But look, that's life. Every house has its own issues. We're no different than anyone else. You know, infrastructure on a farm is one of the most important things as well. See the lack of this here, or lack of tractors or machinery or whatever it is, them things can be here today and gone tomorrow. I don't look at them as the same way as I'd look at doing a building or buying a piece of land or something like that, because that's an investment on your farm that's improving your farm, if that makes sense. Machinery and things like that, they're just there to help you do your work. They're just objects. So machinery doesn't really mean an awful lot to me compared to having the infrastructure here for future generations. So now we're over on the other farm. So this is the new build that you guys would have watched from day one if you're following our channel. The crush alone and having the tank on this farm is it's just so good. It can't be explained how good it is. On this farm we would have our heifers and our calves. Now we do a lot of our breeding through AI, artificial insemination at the moment. So one of the issues I'd have is we'd have to move a heifer out onto the road. I'd need a second person with me for definite, and into a neighbouring crush that we used to all share. That was alright, it worked, but it just meant that you had to wait with the heifer until the man came, and then you had to bring her back, and you always needed a second person. Because trust me, no matter how quiet a road is, as soon as you put an animal on it, the car will come. So this crush here has eliminated all that. It's all about being fit to do as much as you can by yourself, as easy as you can, because my kids are at school, they're busy as it is, and they don't always be here. It's great to have them when they're here at the weekends, but when they're at school and things, you don't always have them. So it's nice to be fit to do this, and I can do this in comfort now. Always was a plan of mine to put a crush over here since the day I started farming on this farm. The shed itself is a 3-bay shed. It was actually a 4-bay shed. We're going to be doing something different with the very end of that, but that's coming down in the future. At the moment it's perfect for us because it holds just our yearlings, basically. That's all we wanted it for, to keep our yearlings over here, and that it does extremely well. The storage is brilliant because we can draw over our slurry now during the winter time and fill this tank, and it's quite a big tank. You watch back in videos when this has been constructed, you'll see how big the tank is. It runs the full length and out past that wall, but we can keep this full all the time and get Jonathan to come with the double bar and pipe anytime we want all around this land, which is mostly silage ground and a little bit of grazing ground. A lot of people ask, how far is this shed away from home? There's home. Can you see that white buildings? Well, there's home. So we're looking straight out my window at this house. If we could walk in a straight line, I'd be home there in 5 minutes. On a quad, you're over here in less than a minute. So locality is perfect. Future of the farm is we will be building a machinery shed. A machinery shed, or possibly two, of another area I haven't showed you yet, just perfect for a little small shed. So machinery shed is number one now on the list in construction, and that's the next project we'll be doing. This year I hope to get a good start bet on that. We'll see how things go, because prices are crazy at the moment, but hopefully we will get something done on that. So yeah, that's a family farm. I hope we explained it as best I can, and we're on a small scale here, but we're trying to build up the ladder without going too fast, too quick, if that makes sense. Anyway folks, I'm going to leave it there for now. Look, hang about for a second or two and you'll see the photos at the end of the video, and you'll see kind of the progress of me working with my father on a couple of things, because my wife has spent this morning picking out old photos in the attic. We've any amount of them, and I haven't seen some of them in over 20 years. So we're going to share some of them with you now, and hopefully we're taking pictures of them with our phone and putting them up on this, so hopefully you can see them and they're clear enough for you guys to make them out. So now you're into the dodgy photos. So here's myself and my father back probably in the early 90s. No gloves in sight. And you can see that wall, that's the wall into the calf house that I was showing you earlier. So that used to be the extension there. So yeah, some herbies there. There was a 565. Our silage pit would have been to the left, and our machinery shed would have been there. That green area is on the right hand side. There's myself and the 565. I absolutely love that tractor and that wooden trailer we had for many years with two very wobbly back wheels, but look, done the job. There was my 698, the first year I had it. I bought that tractor myself when I was 17, and we're just putting up our own silage there, no walls. And there's myself, having aged a bit, I say so myself. There's the old dairy we had. You can see the old full-wood system and water in the half barrels. And that's the way we used to collect our meal for our cows, actually, in just an old milk tank and 2 barrels of meal in the back of the box, and the bag of coal always took home when the mother would be looking to get the house warmed. Now you see the 2 polar bears, or whatever you want to call us. You know, we were Irish, didn't see the sun very often, but what we're doing there is just splitting the yard in 2, just to make it easier for milking the cows, myself and my father. And my father is looking for a couple of old boats. Like myself, always has a big basin full of old waste bolts and nuts and stuff in the old tool shop. And here we see the roof that went missing. That was taken about a couple of months after we lost our roof, so that's the section there gone. And you can see, yeah, it did make a nice mess of that. This here is my father with a cow I remember well. That's back in very early 90s. 209 if I remember right. Twin calves, 2 heifer calves. He's proud of them. That was the 698. That was the second day after I got it. Very proud. Was working on it and putting wee bits and pieces on it, you know, as every young lad does when they get a new toy to play with. So here you see the start of the construction of the silage pit. You see the amount of digging we had to do, just all ready for the walls there, so you can see, yeah, quite a nice bit of work there. Looking from the other side, there's the cubicle house now that I talked about earlier on, straight in front of you. So you're looking here from the machinery shed basically straight down. You can see a bit of the old byre as well. There was what was left of the old cubicle house when we had it all dug out, just getting ready to do the excavation work on the new shed. And that was the last bit. I just took a picture of the last pier that was standing before we took into building the new shed, and you see the yard now the way it is down into the funnel slatted house. And there was eventually the tank got in. That's for the slatted shed at home, the 4-bay slatted shed. It's all one tank, just to the centre division wall, and just for support in the middle. And then you can see we're using the old blocks just to backfill from the old cubicle house, so we didn't waste anything. We crushed them up with the bucket of the digger and just threw them in. But you can see now the yard, how open it was. And here was just the construction of the seal work going up. There's myself standing there. I think I was about 26, remember 26 years old there. There's the timber walking up there now. That was a good moment. I remember taking that photo. I was getting very excited. It's the first proper big shed that I ever got to build, and it was taking shape. And there was the shed built. That's the same shed. That's the 4-bay shed at home. You can see the timber rail fencing was done as well, so you see how open it actually was.
And there's the 4270 and myself just starting to take into the building work short time after. There's the Calving pen going up now. And myself trying to get up on the acro stands here, making a good job of that. Surprised I didn't rip the arse of my trousers. And there's me cooking in, I suppose, into the old slatted shed, taking down the timber rail. And here's the farm in 1976. You can see the potatoes now in that big garden that was there at the time. There could be someone there in the centre working, I'm not sure. You can see that little white figure, it could be my father. The house hasn't changed much, but you can see the old byre now. It's smaller then, it was only after being constructed then, but it's a little smaller than what it was a few years later when he knocked that little rusted roofed shed and extended it on. The other shed on the right hand side with them 4 doors, that's still there. That's the original shed that's still there. My father was just after completing concrete in the street by hand. It took him a few months, but he was glad to get that job done. Here we are in 1990. The byre, you can see there now, you can see the dairy. You can also see the milk tank on wheels beside the dairy. We used to bring our milk to the co-op just behind the car. But you can see the old Cubicle house on construction. You even see my father there on the right hand side. He's looking up with a pair of binoculars at the plane that was taking the photo. We didn't know what was going on. You see the silage pit was a lot different in the same place, but you can see the way it was done then with just dung and bags filled with dung. And you can see there was the only bit of machinery we had, a cattle trailer, wooden cattle trailer, and a little hay fork or hay rake beside it. And here we are in 2022. Obviously the picture's a lot clearer. Technology has moved on. I took this one myself, but it's nice to see the difference. I look back here even myself yesterday, and I was proud to see the difference every 20 years or so. So who knows, another 20 years what it might look like, but progress is there like every other place, and yeah, it's nice to see. Anyway folks, thanks very much for watching as always. Thanks for the support over the last 2 years on our channel, and we really do appreciate it. I hope everybody has a really great 2022, and we look forward to spending our time showing you more stuff and more progression that happens on our farm. As always, if you haven't subbed, now's the time to do it. You can give us a like, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and we'll be on TikTok the odd time as well. I suppose all is left to say is, until the next one, we'll talk to you again.